Hi, I'm Devin.
And I'm Ida.
And welcome to Pandemic Chit Chat,
the podcast where we, two 8th graders, talk about the events of the pandemic through our eyes.
Throughout the past almost year of our lives, Ida and I have been doing school from inside of our home and missing out on many things.
Many 8th graders have shared similar experiences to us, and so we're here sharing a few of them.
This is Pandemic Chit Chat. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of our podcast, Pandemic Chit Chat. We have another special interview episode. We have our principal here, Mr. Cooke, and we're going to be talking to him about what it's like for him to be, leading our school during the pandemic and during distance learning. So my first question is, how did you make an effort to really stay connected with students and staff during the pandemic, since everyone was all over the place in their homes?
Great question. I think it's been easier to stay connected with staff. So I'll start there. With staff, we have regular weekly meetings with the full staff, and then I meet with teachers on kind of a rolling basis to check in, see how folks are doing. We've had a few times where we did just calls to check in on everybody, and we try to call all of the teachers over the course of a week just to make sure they were doing okay, see if they needed anything. So we started doing that last April. And that's helped stay connected, but the truth is I just don't feel as connected as I normally would. That's the reality. I usually stop by classroom doors and pop into rooms all the time. I think personally as a principal, it's been much harder to stay connected to you all, which is kind of why when we first logged on, I geeked out a little bit at just getting to talk. It's been better since February 2nd when I started supervising the CARES room, because then I get to interact with students every day. I do have an advisory, so that's really helped a great deal for me to feel connected to the student body. And it's a group of 7th grade boys, and I ask them lots of questions so I can try and have insights as much as I can. But realistically, popping into classrooms and then trying to have a side conversation and check in with students is just a lot less practical. The main times when I would see students and connect are morning entry, transitions, lunch, recess, dismissal. And I haven't had all 5 of those mechanisms. So I felt more distant from students than I have in the past. And that's been one of the more challenging things. So I've leaned on the teachers, and especially advisory teachers, to keep me looped in about how kids were feeling and doing, and make sure they were staying present and engaged with you all. And every once in a while I get invites here and there to go to class. But I don't want to take up a lot of normal class time, just doing what I normally do, which is informal chit chat with you all during those other times. So that has been tougher.
And how does it feel just being isolated from mainly students? Because I definitely remembered in person the talks with both you and the other assistant principals. They were a way to check in on how we're doing, how we like our teachers, how we like what we're learning, and just a way to connect and sort of feel like we're all united. That's our motto. I know for me, it was really isolated, and I felt separated, or connections were falling apart. So how did it feel for you?
I would say similar. I think it's been nobody, in my opinion, becomes a principal because they like to go to meetings and answer emails. And that's so much of what I've been doing for the past year. You become a principal because you love engaging with kids. And so it's felt, the way I would explain it is if you have a large bucket of your job, and some of it you love 100% and all of it's your job, and some of it you have to do, there's been a huge part of that bucket, which is the being around you all and talking, that's been way more empty. And so my overall bucket has felt lower as far as how much joy I get out of my job. It's been a lot better since we started doing CARES and more in-person learning, just again to see people and see you all and get connected. But it's been it's made the job less enjoyable for sure. That's just the reality. I just don't like it as much when I don't get to do, I think it was the fun part of the work, which is to interact with kids. Even things like when a student gets in trouble, right? Nobody gets in trouble for the most part these days. So people don't come to my office, and I don't get to talk to a student and talk them about how they can do better, or if they're upset, help them work through it. And that's part of what I think I try to be good at. And so the other pieces, I feel like some of my biggest strengths as a principal, because you guys know I'm like always out at front at entry and around all the time, is that I try to connect a lot. And so it's also felt like one of my biggest strengths has been less there this year.
We talked to Miss Pinwani last week about what I'm about to ask you, which was before you at least came back into the classroom for care classes, how was your balance being a principal and working a full-time job and then also being a parent all in the same house? Because that was something that Miss Pinwani liked to talk about.
Yeah, it was tough. It was tough. So I'll share some personal details. The first is that my wife is now 8 months pregnant. And that means that come like in the fall, when I was trying to do my full-time job and she was trying to do her full-time job, she also went through like a really tough period where she was sick a lot and like couldn't get out of bed. And I have a 3-year-old and a 5-year-old, and we had no childcare. So you can imagine like what I looked like and how little I was sleeping for a while there. However, the balance to that is that I did get to see my daughters a lot more. You know, my 3-year-old was born on the 3rd day of school. It was your guys' 5th grade year. And I took off 2 days, the day she was born and the next day, and then I was back at work. And so I haven't spent as much time with my children as I would have liked to. So the balancing part of like being a parent and doing the job then was that I did get to see my kids more. But it's tough because they're, you know, half the time they'd be sitting in my lap during class, during my advisory. Like my advisory boys know what my daughters look like because they were sitting in my lap a lot, or meetings. And because they're too small to do stuff without one of us on them. It's gotten a little better since I've been going back to work for me because I'm in the building all the time. I started coming in the building 5 days a week in about November, and then have been doing that since, and then being with kids in the cares room since February 2nd. And it does mean that it's just like it's easier for me to work from here because I'm not dealing with my children, although I love them to death. And we were without childcare of any kind for a long time, like a lot of parents. Still, we have a lot of gaps and challenges in that make it tough. You know, there are days where I have to like start my day in the building, then rush home so my wife can do her job and I can watch the kids and stuff like that. And then there are days where it's like I get home and my wife works till midnight to get her work done after I get home. You know, I think a lot of parents are experiencing some version of this. But again, I would be lying if I didn't also note that seeing my children more consistently when they're, you know, young was an unexpected benefit of being able to work from home for a while.
Yeah, and I know I have 2 siblings that one's 4 and one was born 2 days after we were sent home in the pandemic.
Oh, wow.
So
you've been doing a lot of childcare too.
Yeah, that first period of the pandemic, doing school with like 2 children just running around all the time. Anyway. But now my brother is very quiet, and they're both at school, so we're okay.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, my daughters, they still don't have any in-person school, so like, I think it would be easier if they had in-person school, but they don't have any, so it's still a little tough. But I've seen a lot of students like you, like while I'm in class with them or you know connecting with them, like managing their siblings while they're doing school because maybe their parents had to go into work and things like that. There's been a lot of you all too, students who have been doing that childcare and school at the same time work, and it's extremely tough. A lot of respect to you all who have done that. It's hard as a full-grown adult to manage all that when you're, you know, a teenager is quite a bit.
Yeah, and I know at the very beginning of the pandemic, those first 2 weeks, a lot of us were hopeful that this would all be over after those 2 weeks. We'd be back in the building, or maybe hybrid. And I know we kept that hope pretty much until we did start going back. But how hopeful were you that we are going to go back at any point before February?
I mean, I've been hopeful. I think I remember the moment that I was told that it might be possible we didn't go back at all this year. And I'm glad that's not the case. You know, it's limited what we have right now, as you both know. I think you're both coming in like half-time 1 or 2 days a week. So it's very limited. But there was a point where I was told that it might not happen at all. And I felt like somebody hit my chest with a sledgehammer. And that was a while ago. And I'm glad that it turned out not to be the case. but I've been hopeful, same as you all since 2 weeks. And I think it caught us all off guard. Nobody expected 2 weeks to stretch into close to a year and a half. And so every time we'd get an update from the mayor's office or something, it was like, it was just like, oh, well, I guess it's going to be another couple months and then we'll see, and another couple months and then we'll see. And I've tried to stay hopeful, but it hasn't always been easy. I'm like 100% hopeful about the fall, right? Everybody's been told we're back 5 days in a week, and that has had a huge impact on my spirits, like thinking that, we'll be able to get back to, as quote normal as possible as far as school goes, and 5 days a week in person in the fall. So that's got my hopes up again. I honestly, if that doesn't happen, I'm going to be very, very disappointed. So, but I really do think it will. I think that we're headed in the right direction. So I'm hopeful again.
Yeah, I'm also, I think that once we finished last year's school year, I think things kind of shifted between then and when we started this year. I think a lot of students like us, we kind of like lost hope almost, because it was just like, you're not going back, wait till next term, you're not going back, wait till next term. But also there are people who have differing opinions about going back. I know some people don't want to go back still because either they have like family they're still worried about, or they just, online learning really works for them. So how do you accommodate that? Because you can't force everyone to go back until until the city says everyone's going back and your attendance will be counted as absent if you don't go back. So how are you accommodating everyone who has different feelings about it?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to be honest, I don't think we are accommodating everyone. I think the reality is, like, we know we have some students and families who wish they were back 5 days a week, and we're not able to accommodate that. And right now, the students and families who want to remain virtual 5 days a week, or however you want to look at it, they are being accommodated. And I think you're going to see a significant shift come fall, where we're going to be accommodating the families who want to be back 5 days a week very significantly and clearly. And the families who may still want to have virtual options, I think it's going to be, I don't want to make a prediction, especially on recording, but I'll just say, like, I think it's going to be tougher. I think it's going to be tougher to support virtual instruction in the fall, because we're going to be putting so much of our investment into in-person learning. It's going to be harder to do virtual learning well. I think it's tough to balance that as far as supporting students and families. It's also tough, I think, as you noted, to support staff, because we have some staff members who've been back in the building from like the first moment we were allowed to be, like, full day. Like, and others that are still nervous. The reality is they'll all be back in the building in the fall. But I think some people are going to be very anxious about that. Some people may not be able to get vaccinated, or, like, again, personally, my circumstance when I came back, I was anxious the first day that we had kids in February 2nd. I knew my wife was, like, at that point, I guess she was 4 months pregnant. Is that right? 4 or 5 months pregnant. And she couldn't get vaccinated. I wasn't fully vaccinated. And I had a lot of, like, nervousness about, God, forgive me if I, like, get her sick, right? Like, I was really worried, and that abated. I was able to get vaccinated fairly quickly, and that abated, right? And then I worry less, but it's still a reality. She'll be eligible to get vaccinated soon. Long story, but that'll help. But I think every person's circumstance, it's like a snowflake. Like, every individual person's circumstance is so unique. Every student, every family, every staff member, that you can't even compare one to one, because there's literally all these subtle differences to where everybody is and why. So I think you started asking how we accommodate them, and I know that we're not accommodating everyone in what they want. That's just the reality. And disappointing people is not something I like to do. So I'm trying to make sure I don't do that more than I have to.
Yeah. And we've all learned a bunch of different things this past year and a half. Students and staff have really learned to be flexible and sort of adjust when necessary and keep, like, I guess, resilient, keep everything going smoothly. But what are you looking to take from what you've learned in this pandemic and incorporate it into next year, future years, just maybe how you teach or how you do accommodate people who have a tougher time.
So I'm gonna try to answer your question. I'm gonna give you two answers, and if I don't hit the question that you're asking me, just ask me again. But I think the first piece is one thing that we've learned is that this learning style, like virtual or online, actually does work for some of our students. I've read a lot of research about it. They estimate 10 to 15% are actually doing better this way. And I think it's important that we learn what we can bring back to in person from that. How can we take what's working for some students or what's working for all students, like pieces of it, and not just throw that out completely with virtual learning? What can we keep? And especially those students who really struggle to learn in person, but are thriving virtually. How can we make sure we support them? So that's one piece of learning I think is essential. And the second thing is, I'll answer this question personally. I learned how much connecting to students and teaching a class are critical for me to like feel connected to the school and engaged. So I intend to keep an advisory forever, which I think has been really important for me personally this year as a principal, because it connects me to the kids and the school. And then I'm hoping to maybe teach a class as well this fall or co-teach a class. So that's just personally what I've learned about like how I can improve my leadership and also include like ways that bring me joy about this work. So does that answer the question? All right, good.
Yep.
The last question I have is, what do you want students to take away from this year? I mean, what do you want them to bring with them, whether it's us because we're leaving Hardy or, you know, people who are coming into it, just who have, because everyone's experienced virtual school in a different way. So how should we go forward?
I think firstly, I would know that if like, I want you guys to know that if nothing else, like this, I think has reiterated to every one of us in the profession how much we love our students and we miss them when we're not with them, right? Like you should know that about your staff and your teachers and myself. But I think personally for you guys, you should understand that what you've been asked to do as young people, and I think it's been a bigger ask of middle school students in some ways because of where you guys are in your like the growth in your development. What you've had to endure in the past year and what you've been required to persist through have made you stronger than probably any group of students that's ever come before you. And you've done it, which should tell you that when you hit hurdles in the future, you can do it. You've come through something that no one else ever has. So don't ever doubt yourself when you hit a hard AP class or struggle in your first year of college. You've been through this. Nothing is likely to ever be as hard as what you guys have gone through. And that's not even taking into account the emotional stress that you've all endured. Many of us have lost people in this. Nothing will be this hard again, which means everything that you encounter, you can overcome. I would urge you guys to take that, especially my 8th graders who I won't have to like breathe that message into in person next year. Take that message with you to high school. You're gonna hit some tough classes in high school. It's gonna be a cakewalk compared to what you guys were able to do this year, as long as you push through and maintain that perseverance.
I think that's it. I don't have.
Yeah, I have nothing else to add after that.
Thank you so much for being a part of our podcast.
Yeah.
And thank you both. I'm glad
episode.
I was able to, yeah, I'm glad I was able to join you guys and connect. And like I said, I missed this. I miss talking. Like we would have been able to have this conversation informally or checked in 50 times this year, you know. So thank you for thinking to include me and give me a chance to connect and talk and yeah, made my day. I'm telling you, this was the highlight of my day. And I don't say that jokingly. Like I've had a bunch of meetings all morning, and I did have fun with my advisory, but this is the best part. So I appreciate you both and thank you for including me.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Having you.
Thank you for listening to that episode of Pandemic Chit Chat with our principal, Mr. Cooke. Stay tuned for some more interviews coming very soon and maybe a special finale episode.
I know. We have to say farewell to our 8th grade year and our whole middle school experience, which is sad but exciting. So We'll see you next time. Catch you on the flip side.